So for everyone that's in their early stage of their startup, April Dunford's going to come up and talk about just kind of laying that foundation for how to get your sales and marketing going. Obviously, that first year is tough and trying to get out there and do those big things. So we're going to have April Dunford come on up. Thank you. Give her a round of applause. Thank you.
Okay, I'm coming. Ooh. Okay, I'm coming. That was fun, right? The big selfie? Yeah. Put me on after lunch because I'm the bad news. I don't know. You guys don't know me. I'm kind of repeat marketing and sales person at a bunch of startups. I think I've done 5 or 6, 4 exits, a bunch of big ones. Working on a new startup now called Tulip Retail, and I'll tell you about that later. But I speak at these conferences a lot, and I'm like the big bummer. So you're going to hate this talk, just so you know right now. And the reason people get bummed out when I give this talk is because everybody wants magic. I want magic too. I wish there was more magic. And in fact, every startup I'm at, I get bummed out that there isn't more magic. There should be more magic, right? And we hear a lot about the one thing that Airbnb did in marketing and that made the company, right? Or, I changed the button color on the buy now thing and conversions went up 5 bazillion%. And you're sitting there with your startup going, I don't know, man, it's like a slog. Every day I do stuff and most of it doesn't work and occasionally some stuff works and nobody else seems to have this problem. And the reality is everybody's got the problem, right? But we don't read that, right? On the surface, it all looks easy. And the reality is when we're just thinking about marketing tactics or sales tactics, the tactics themselves are super easy. In fact, they're so easy, I can learn how to do them on Google, no sweat, right? So if I Google how to use Google AdWords, there's like 6 million articles that'll tell me how to do that. And I like this one, the ultimate guide to content marketing. There's like 24 million ultimate guides to content, super ultimate guides, and there's 24 million of them. So if I need to learn how to do content marketing, I'm feeling pretty good that you guys could Google that and figure it out, right? So, and yet, like you heard it all morning, right? Nobody gets up here and says, oh yeah, I'm making money at my startup. Pff, easy, building a product was the hard thing. Oh, making the money, yeah, no, that was easy. Nobody says that, right? And this is kind of a philosophical question that I've thought about a lot because I've always been on the how do we make money side of the business. And, it wasn't actually apparent to me in the first maybe 10 years of my career why this was so hard. And again, it felt like it was easy for everybody else, but it wasn't easy for me. And I thought, well, am I just stupid? Am I just not learning this stuff? Or, occasionally I do some stuff that work, and I'd be like, well, that worked. How come it doesn't work like that all the time? Why is this stuff so hard? And I'll tell you, this is actually the answer. So I feel like I know this now. And so the answer is that you can execute marketing and sales stuff perfect, and write an ultimate guide about it. You do it so perfect. But if the foundation upon which you are executing that stuff is flawed, they will fail. And that's the thing that nobody gets. And so I'm going to talk about what's the foundation and why is that foundational stuff so hard. And so the first one is understanding your target customer. Everybody says this, right? Understanding, and everybody goes, yeah. Like I don't know who my target customer is. Of course, what do you think, I'm stupid? Of course I know who my target customer is. I have this conversation all the time. I saw the guys from Communitech here. They put up with me for 6 months as an entrepreneur in residence. And so you take all these meetings with startups and they say, who's your target customer? And they say, small, medium businesses. I'm like, that's cool. Like dry cleaners? No, not dry cleaners. Oh, all right, not dry cleaners. Convenience stores? No, not convenience stores. Car dealerships? No, not that. It's like, well, then what is it, right? It's not small, medium businesses if I just eliminated car dealerships and convenience stores and dry cleaners, right? So what is it? And so what actually matters about your target customer that you have to figure out? And so this actually took me a long time to figure this out, right? Like what it is that actually makes a segment And it's not just the size of the company. In fact, sometimes it's not the size of the company at all that matters, but it's other stuff, right? So you have to worry about the unique qualities of what makes them a segment for you, right? You have to think about, do they have specific pain? Sometimes the segment is based just on the pain that the customer has. And then you got to think about other stuff, right? Like if I can't tell you a gathering spot for that segment, then it probably doesn't exist as a segment. So segments, those folks hang out together somewhere online. Sometimes they do it in person. And then they generally have a common way that they learn about stuff. So, you know, either they hear it from their friends, or they go to the conference, or there's online communities where they hang out, or they're really big on a particular social media channel. And that's where they learn about stuff. And so until you really understand those four things, you don't actually really know your segment enough to be able to make decisions about how to properly market to them. So I'll tell you a story. I was an interim CEO or CMO with a company that had raised some money, and I had this conversation with the CEO, and I said, who's your target market? And he says, Fortune 1000 companies. And I was like, Fortune 1000 companies. And they did this thing, it's like requirements management stuff. And I'm like, all Fortune 1000 companies build software in-house? Like, what if you're like a mining company? It's like, no, not mining companies, but other Fortune 1000 companies that build software in-house. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I was a Fortune 5000 company and I built software in-house? Would I be in your target? Well, yeah, if you were big enough, you would. Well, okay, well, what's big enough? Well, you have to have more than like, you know, the end user for this thing is a business analyst. You have to have more than like 100 business analysts. Oh. Who's got more than 100 business analysts? That sounds like a lot, right? Software companies? No, not software companies. We exclude those. Okay, so they're excluded too. Who's got more than 100? Guys that outsource stuff to India and China have more than 100 business analysts, because it's really hard to write software if you got a team in China and a team in whatever. It takes like an army of business analysts to work this stuff out. And so then it became, and then if you looked at all the tactics, right? So what were the tactics they're running? Oh, they're running ads in the Wall Street Journal, and they're doing stuff in Forbes and blah, 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 because their target is Fortune 1000 companies. When in fact, if you looked at it and said, well, no, actually, if you started with, my target is folks that outsource a crap ton of stuff to India and China, then, you know, they actually have conferences where people go to learn that stuff. There's like newsletters. You can actually sign up to there's a thing called Outsourcing Today. You can sign up for that. And like, that's way cheaper to advertise in Outsourcing Today than it is in the Wall Street Journal, and way more targeted, right? I actually had two examples, and one of them wasn't even that one, about this. And so, how is the CEO of manufacturing plant similar to a banker? They aren't. So the way you know you've got this down is if you feel like you can just climb inside the head of your target customer, and where I think the real flashes of brilliance in terms of customer acquisition and lead generation stuff happen is when you get this kind of moment of insight where you're like, oh yeah, my people are gonna love this thing. And then it all works out great. And so I have two examples where this happened. Like once was, I worked for this company that sold investment banks. And you know, Dan DeBoe was up here earlier, and he was talking about the currency for Mozilla was T-shirts, and if you get people wearing your T-shirts, yeah, investment bankers, that doesn't work so good. But I was trying to get at that, right? What is the T-shirt equivalent for an investment banker? Like if I was trying to sell to the head of investment banking, and we knew exactly who those people were, and we knew where they were, we just couldn't get a meeting with them, right? So our whole mission in life was, how do I get a meeting with the head of investment bank in a big investment bank in North America? And so you can't do it through email. They don't read email. You can't invite them to a webinar. You know, they don't show up for that. They Google around a little bit, but not on anything that you could predict or want to know about. And then so they're really, really hard people to get a meeting with. And so we were kind of doing things going in low in the organization, climbing up or whatever. But so I thought, I'm going to go talk to as many of these people as I can to try and get in, I don't even know what an investment banker cares about. So I had a sales rep, we had a deal going on with the investment bank at the time. And so I went in and I had a meeting with this guy, and I sat in his office, and he had a desk full of toys. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like toys. And he had this, and so I picked one of them up and I said, hey, it was like a car. And I said, hey, that car, that's really cool. And he says, you have no idea how cool that car is, lady. He's like, and he puts it on the ground and he has this controller and he races this thing around his office. And it is like, this car costs like $3,000. It's like some little race car thing, and it's a Ferrari, and it's totally to scale, and whatever. And he has a car similar to that, but not that exact one because they only make 4 of those in the planet. That gives me the whole story. And so this gave me this idea, like, maybe this is how I get a meeting with a guy like this, right? I appeal to his love of desktop toys. And so we did this little experiment. I was about to go to a trade show, and our trade shows were always kind of crappy things, but I was running out of bright ideas on this one on how to get meetings with folks. And so I was about to spend $50,000 on a trade show. And instead of spending $50,000 on a trade show, I found this company that makes these cars, and I negotiated a deal, and I bought $50,000 worth of cars. This was actually like it gave me a lot of heartburn at the time because it was pretty much like half my marketing budget I was spending on fancy little Ferrari cars. And we sent these guys, because we knew who they were, we sent them the car, and then we didn't send them the controller. And so then we sent them a note and we said, hey, we're doing a cool thing with Goldman Sachs. This was another thing. I wasn't allowed to use Goldman as a reference, but I could in my little email. I said, we're doing this cool thing with Goldman Sachs, and we'd love to tell you about it. And by the way, when we come to meet you, I'll bring the controller. And so I had actually 25 meetings out of that. We did 2 deals, little over 6 million business on a cheesy car, right? But the point is, right, you can't use that, right? You can't steal that idea and use that, right? You have to do your own work and figure out what the flash of brilliance is for your target, right? Because the little car thing would only work for the investment banker, right? I can't turn around and use that. A second story on this. Same thing, working at this company, we're beyond the startup stage, about 80 million revenue. And we have the world's most technologically advanced marketing department ever. And I say this with great pride. We had Marketo. We were doing the most sophisticated segmentation email campaigns you've ever seen in your life. It was prize winning. We're doing SEO, we're doing AdWords, we're doing a pretty good job on that. We had great content marketing stuff. Most of our leads were coming inbound. And so we got really sophisticated at looking at all our segments and figuring out what works and what doesn't. And we had this segment. We're selling to mid-size manufacturing plants. And so we had this segment that was really underperforming amongst all the other ones. And you could see it was like the founder still ran the business, but it was a pretty big business. And we were trying to sell them ERP solutions. Anyways, I happened to be on a visit with a customer that was in Michigan, and a lot of these guys were in Michigan. So I said, I'm going to drive around and visit these guys that never open my email and never click on my ads and never do anything, and just figure out what goes on in that office. And so you drive up to a manufacturing plant, and these guys drive Cadillacs, right? All of them. They all have a giant Cadillac parked right beside the door. And you go in, and there's this guy, and he's in his 60s. And I'm like, hey, we run this stuff and whatever, and I just kind of want to get to know you guys. And I say, so, do you get a lot of email? The guy says, yeah, I get tons of email. My admin reads all of them, and the ones that are not junk mail or people trying to sell me stuff, she prints them out, and she brings them into my office, and then she tells me and then I tell her what she should respond to those ones. I'm like, okay, email, that explains why none of my email works. He's got a computer, he's not using it. He's got, he doesn't even know what his email address is. This was 4 years ago. Can you believe that? He doesn't even want to. And so I'm thinking, I've got this really sophisticated digital marketing machine going over here, and then I've got this guy who's immune to all that stuff. And so I was getting really depressed, and I was sitting in the thing, and I'm trying to think, how would you get to this guy? So I'm like, do you go to shows? No. Do you read magazines? No. Do you sign up for a newsletter? Ha ha. Do you whatever? No. And then while we're talking, there's this noise in the corner. This is actually a true story. I've never told this before because it's really embarrassing. So there's this noise in the corner. It goes, and the guy gets up and he goes, oh, that's really funny. And he's standing in front of this box, and I'm like, what's that? And he's like, it's my fax machine. And he pulls this thing out, and he's standing there laughing his head off. And I said, do you get a lot of faxes? And he says, no, that's why it's so funny. And I was like, I gotcha. So then I went back in the office, and like I got all my people in there, like Marketo, and they're all digital, whatever. And I'm like, we're doing a fax campaign. And so we didn't even know how to send faxes. So we're like, running around. And so we did this really funny campaign. The gal that set it up in Salesforce, we had a campaign ID for it in Salesforce. You know, you track this stuff in Salesforce. And she called it the F-bomb. It was the campaign that dare not say its name. She was like, we can't even tell people we're running this. Like, after it'd been running for like 3 weeks, it was going really good. And the head of sales is like, I don't know what that F-bomb thing is you guys are running, but it's working really good. We got like all these leads out of this thing. Anyways, the point, again, right? Like, do not go on Twitter and say, April Dunford said we should all send faxes. Like, that's how we're going to make $1 billion. It won't work for anybody else, right? Won't work for, like, I will never do it again, I'm pretty sure. But it's might work for you. And here's the negative example. I worked for this company. We got acquired by Siebel. At the time, Siebel was the biggest CRM company in the world. This is when Salesforce was still little. It's like 10 years ago. And all my campaigns were shit, basically. So everything I was running was crap. And in fact, the whole company was falling off the cliff, and the stock was in the dumper. And so whenever we did the triage on why don't these campaigns work, everybody said it wasn't the campaigns, it was the economy, right? So the economy's crap. No one's buying, budgets are all dried up. And so, but what's funny, you know, I got crawling through the data, and I had one inside salesperson that was knocking it out of the park. And I was like, that guy does something. I don't know what he does. It's different than everybody else. But I got a guy here that's actually driving a little business nobody else is. And so I went and sat with that guy, and it was the worst day of my life, actually. So this guy, what he did, so, you know, like, I have this, it's a big company, right? $2 billion revenue. Like, I inherited this department after we got acquired. And I've got email campaigns running against a database with about 500,000 names in it. I've got messaging and positioning. I've got, like, really this matrix of stuff running. And everything is focused on this particular buyer, the person that buys CRM at the time, which is the head of IT. And so what happens is all these campaigns are running, and the leads come in, and the inside salesperson gets that lead, and then they call them, and then they qualify it, and they try to book a meeting for the outside person, right? So my champion inside guy, who's the only person that's selling anything, I'm sitting on the phone with him, and I'm like, I'm just going to sit and hear what you do, because you must do something cool in these calls. And he says, okay. And so he calls into the lead, and the lead says, yeah, I love your stuff, really need to do it, but you know what, there's no budget. Economy's bad. It's really bad. There's no budget. We're not going to do it this year, maybe next year. Same thing I've been hearing forever, right? You know what my inside guy says? Who's your head of sales? Can you transfer me? And he transfers over to the head of sales. Worst day of my life. I got like literally millions of dollars of campaigns running against the wrong buyer. So the market's changed. I'm making a big assumption that the buyer's IT. And all of a sudden the buyer is somebody else. And so when we unwound that and backed up and said, you know, the reason our stuff wasn't working was, yeah, the economy was crappy, and that was a piece of it. But the other big piece of it was that the buying power was shifting from one department to another, and we missed it totally. Anyways, see, it's a bummer, right? It's a bummer. April's talk's a bummer. You can tweet that. April's talk, she's bumming me out. Customer-oriented messaging. This is like my favorite topic because I like messaging a lot. There's so much you can do. Like, people don't understand like how powerful it is, right? The way you tell a story about what you do can totally change everything, like just everything. And sometimes it just kills me because I meet these startups that have these amazing products, and they just can't describe what it is. But you just feel like if you could unlock it in a way that people understood it, then, you know, we'd all be bajillionaires. But there's kind of big things to do with your messaging. I won't go on and on about this too much, but the first kind of basic level of it is like, what do you do, right? In a really simple way. It's amazing how many small companies really struggle with that. The company I'm with right now, Tulip Retail, I'll talk about this a little bit more, but we probably spent 2 months on this because it's really complicated what we do, and it's not obvious. And there's 8 different ways we could describe it, and we tested it with customers, and we had a whole bunch of meetings, and we said, well, how about this? And you know when you don't have it, because everybody kind of goes, yeah, what was that again? Like, I mean, you know when you've got it, right? Instead everyone's like, that's cool, tell me more, right? And so much of the time you don't have that, right? The second thing is your unique value, right? Like what's so cool about you versus everybody else. The next one is alternatives, right? So frame of reference is a really important thing in your messaging. Like what you say you do automatically sets you up against other alternatives. I'll give an example of that. And then there's the proof, right? It's one thing for you to say, you know, we're the easiest thing ever. We have the most beautiful user interface ever. But it actually doesn't mean anything unless somebody else says it. And so either that's a reviewer or that's a customer or it's somebody that your user potential customer base gives a crap about. I'll give you an example of this. Two, actually. So I worked at a company and we made a database. It was a database, that's what it was. And it was a database where you could do this like really fast needle in a haystack query if you had a big bunch of data that was all kind of similar. And so a really good salesperson, and I was new in the company, and so the first thing I did for the first few weeks is just tail along with the salesperson and hear how he's pitching it. And so he'd go in and he'd start with, we're a database. And you could just see, like, in fact, most of our meetings went like this. He'd say, we're a database. And the guy's like, we're an Oracle shop. We don't need that. You say, yeah, but we're not that kind of database. We're a different kind of database. We're a special database that does special things in a special way. Honest, right? And you lost them right at database. Like you could just tell everyone was like, yeah, are you Oracle? Well, then we don't want your database. And so, you know, I suffered through like 2 weeks of this. It was painful, right? And it was clear, like, we got to do something different. And we got lucky on this one in that the customer told me how to solve this problem. So we're in this thing, and the guy does this whole pitch, and this ended up being our kind of first big customer, but he was so patient. We did this whole pitch, and the pitch was really crappy, and the guy didn't understand it, and he asked 1,000 questions. And then at the end, he says, you know what your problem is? And I was like, what? Please tell me. He says, you're not a database. And I'm like, we're not? What are we? He says, you're a data warehouse. And I'm like, all right. What's different about a data warehouse? And then we had a big conversation about it. In my mind, there wasn't a difference between a data warehouse and a database, thank you very much, really. I mean, and basically this guy educated me on that for that customer set. If I said I was a database, then immediately my comparables are Oracle, and I'm an Oracle shop, and all my guys know Oracle SQL, and we can't bring another database in here. But if you say I'm a data warehouse, well, you know, Oracle's data warehouse kind of shit, and we don't use that. And we have other things, we have Netezza and other things in here that are weird one-off things, and yeah, maybe we need yours too. Right? And so if I said it was a data warehouse for machine-generated data, that actually sounds kind of sexy, as opposed to databases, right? Which wasn't sexy at all. And so the way you describe this stuff, even at the most basic level, right, can completely end up the same product, right? Same product, no difference in the product, right? Same what we do. It just gave us the opportunity to finish the pitch, right? We never got a chance to finish the pitch with a customer that way. Another example I have on this is I did a stint at IBM headquarters, doing database stuff actually, and one of my jobs, because it was a big division, and we made a bunch of acquisitions. And you know what's fun, sitting on the other side of acquisitions, being in a big company that's buying little companies. That's fun. And anyways, I quit IBM because I couldn't stand it, and then I moved back home to Toronto. I was living in New York at the time, and I moved back home, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go back to work in a startup because that's what I do. And I got this call from this company that we had looked at acquiring and we didn't acquire. And they said, oh, they're looking for a head of marketing, whatever. So I went in and I met with the guy, and he pitched it to me, just the CEO pitched it to me the same way that my acquisitions guy went down and looked at it and said, that thing's a dog. We can't buy it because there's no growth in that business. But then I sat down with the CTO, and they had all this stuff that they weren't talking about, right? And so anyways, long story short, I decided to join the company, and we did a relaunch, and we just changed what it was. And it was the exact same thing as database versus data warehouse. It was like they were calling themselves a replication tool when they were an information integration platform, right? But it's the same freaking thing, right? But nobody knows they need this. Everybody knows they need this, right? And so, and the funny thing is we repositioned the company. We pretended we had a new release. We didn't. But the stuff was all there, right? So we just reintroduced the stuff that we already had that we were burying and not talking about, reintroduced it to the market. And then IBM came back and bought them, and then I had no job, and I was sad. See, it's a sad talk. That's the theme. Sad, sad, sad talk. This is the last piece. I'm probably running out of time. Yeah, this is the last piece. This is the hardest piece, and you won't be able to read these slides when I get there. But and this is actually the hardest piece. But if you can figure this out, this is like, in some ways, especially if you're selling complex stuff, bigger stuff, this is kind of the keys to the kingdom, which is, how does the buyer actually buy? And so what I mean by that is, most people go through a process, right? And they start at this place where they don't even know they need something, right? Like, before you saw an iPad, you didn't know you needed an iPad. The world was fine, right? And then you saw an iPad and you realized, I really need an iPad. And then you started looking at, well, in the eval stage for Apple stuff, there is no eval stage. You just buy the iPad. But for other things, you look at alternatives and you think, well, which iPad should I buy? And then you buy it, right? And then you use it and enjoy it, and you keep buying the new one, or you use it and you hate it, whatever, and you never buy another one again, and you go back to this state where you don't think the world needs one. And so what the important part, and this is not always linear, and sometimes people jump around. That's not the point, right? The point is, there's a journey, and your customers go on this journey, right? And at any stage in this journey, there's things that'll make them go faster towards the buy, and things that'll slow them down. So, if I think it's risky, I won't buy it. If I think it's too expensive, I might wait till it goes on sale. If it's if I have a bad user experience or whatever, I won't buy it, right? I go to the dealership to get the car, and the guy's a jerk to me, and I end up buying a car at some other dealership. Like, there's lots of things that can mess this up, and there's things that can make it go faster, right? So it's like my mother with smartphones, right? For the longest time, she's like, why does anyone want a smartphone? And I'm like, because you do your email on it. She's like, I don't need to do my email on my phone. And then one of these days, she says, why do I need a smartphone? And I said, because you can Facebook on there. And she's like, smartphone, I'm getting one. And like, literally within a week, she had a smartphone, right? But it was like, she just needed to know the value of having one that compelled her to go and do it. And then what's interesting about this, and again, this is kind of the master class of this stuff, and so I'm trying to jam this in a 30-minute talk, but whatever. These slides will be up somewhere. I'll tweet it. Then you've got this thing, right? Like, these different, for every market, people are stuck in a different spot, right? In general, right? Your target market stuck in a different spot. Sometimes they're all stuck down at, I don't even know what the hell this thing is, right? Like, you're selling that Muse headband thing, right? Everybody's down here. Nobody knows they want one of those. Nobody even knows what one of those things is for, right? So all your marketing has to be concentrated on, you got to convince me I got a problem that's worth solving, right? If I spend all my thing trying to prove that I'm better than the other brainwave headband thing, then that is a waste of time, right? But a lot of startups I see are putting all their energy into this, trying to prove there's a problem, trying to prove that they have a solution to that problem, whatever, when the market's way over here, right? And it's like, yeah, I get it, but prove to me you're better than doing it on paper, or doing it with an intern, or not doing it, I don't know, maybe not doing it at all, right? Or just doing it crappy. Last story, and then I'm done. But this kind of relates to this buy process thing. So the company that I'm at right now is called Tulip Retail. And so you guys aren't my target market, otherwise I'd pitch you. But we're selling to big retailers. And we're selling this kind of tablet-based platform for sales associates. So if you go into the store, the sales associate's going to know everything about products and everything about you, and you're going to have this fantastic customer experience when you walk in. And so the people I'm selling to are like Target, Macy's, Nike, guys like that. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about this buy process because they're big deals, right? Like, on average, it's sort of $500,000 deal. And so what you worry about when you're a startup and you're selling those kind of deals is that, I need to be able to close that quickly. And if it drags out and takes me 2 years to close one of those things, then I'm in big trouble. And so normally, when you sell this stuff, or at least in the olden days when we sold this stuff, there would be a stage in the process called a proof of concept, which means we actually do kind of a live test in-house. So that CRM company I was telling you about, we did a proof of concept for every single deal. It was torture, right? We had to put free resources inside the company, build the thing, get it working with their data, set it up, run a test, and then if they didn't like the test, they didn't buy our stuff and we went home and it was a completely wasted effort and super expensive. And so in this one, we started talking to retailers and we're kind of mapping out the buying process, right? And for some of these big ones, occasionally they would say, well, we do this thing and then we'll do a proof of concept. And I'm like, no, we won't. No, we won't. I hate proof of concepts. Not doing a proof of concept, right? Takes too long, free resources, can't make any money, stalls the deal, not doing it, right? And so the crazy thing is you can't fight the customer's buying process, right? You can only optimize the buying process to your advantage. And so even though I know this, right, even though I've been doing this a million years, it feels like, I was still sitting there going, no, I don't care if that's your buying process. I'm not doing your buying process because I don't want to do that proof of concept. No, 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 no. And then finally, I had the giant deal show up. And so the giant deal was one of these ones where it really is a giant deal. These guys have 7,000 stores. We haven't closed it yet, so I can't tell you who they are. But we came in super late in the deal. It reminded me of Michael Litt's story this morning. Like, we got introduced to them through one of our investors. The investor, the guys took a meeting with us out of a favor to our investor. And the first thing out of the guy's mouth was, look, we're 2 weeks away from signing a deal with someone else, and we can't use you. And I said, okay. And so we chased this deal like crazy, chased it. We built a custom demo for them. They kept telling me they couldn't meet with me. We can't meet with you. We're in San Francisco. I said, oh, that's funny. I'm in San Francisco. Of course, I'm not in San Francisco, right? And they're like, no, we're booked up all day. And I said, well, I'm free for breakfast. Where are you staying? And so I literally did make these guys go have breakfast with me. And so and they just kept saying, no, 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 no. And finally, the way I actually got these guys to consider us and turf the other guys out was to suggest the proof of concept. And so I said, I know, why don't we do a proof of concept? And what's crazy about it is, had I suggested it 4 weeks earlier, we would have been 4 weeks ahead of ourselves, right? And me trying to fight it was just wasting our time. And so now we're in this proof of concept where there's resources dedicated. The other thing was that my assumptions about proof of concept, turns out they were kind of wrong. So I didn't want to do proof of concept because I don't want to do this shit for free. And so I said, well, we'll do a proof of concept, but we're going to charge you. And the guy's like, that's all right. I said, I'm going to charge you like $100,000. He's like, okay. I was like, damn, I should charge him $200,000. So my assumption was they weren't going to pay. They're going to pay. My assumption was these things are going to run for 2 months or 3 months, and this thing's going to run for 6 weeks. And so I'm like, you know what? I can actually do the proof of concept. If it was a proof of concept like that, you pay me all kinds of money, and it's really short, and whatever. Anyways, that's my story about that. And that's all I've got. That's it. It's torture. Time is over.